Tips with Tony. Tips with Tony. All about nutrition from your favorite dietitian. Everything you need to digest in your mind. Tips with Tony. Tips with Tony. Making you healthier one bite at a time. With Tony. Woo!
Hello and welcome to the Tips with Tony podcast. I'm Tony Marinucci, your registered dietitian, helping you get healthy one bite at a time. I'm so excited for our very next guest. I have virtually in front of me Meredith O'Brien. She's a clinical social worker and she specializes in helping people heal their relationship with food and heal from eating disorders. She's an author of a very new book, which I'm super excited to hear about. And today, just as a fair warning, I always like to disclose, we will be talking about eating disorders, particularly anorexia. So if at any time you find this triggering, you need to take a break, or, maybe you just aren't ready to listen, totally okay. Please take a break and then come back another time, or just, maybe you just know that she's a good resource when you're ready to reach out for help. So without further ado, Meredith, welcome to the Tips with Tony podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
You're so welcome. So excited to have you. So first question I always ask our guests is, I would love for you to introduce yourself by sharing who you are, what you do, and more importantly, why you do what you do.
Wonderful. Sure. So I'm Meredith O'Brien. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I am the director of a mental health practice called Meredith O'Brien and Affiliates, LLC in Red Bank, New Jersey. I am also a Carolyn Costin certified eating disorder coach, and I have a coaching business on the side called Recovery from Anorexia. I also am a certified intuitive eating counselor. I am fully recovered from my own eating disorder. So that is really kind of answering the last question of why I do what I do, is that I have a lived experience suffering from anorexia for over 25 years. And I was able to fully recover with the tremendous support and guidance. And so I'm here to let people know that full recovery is possible, and I help them get the resources to be able to do so. I'm also a new author of my new memoir. It's called Opening the Door, My Journey Through Anorexia to Full Recovery. And I am also a proud pet owner to my golden doodle, Maverick. I call her Mavi, and she is my best decision. And she was one of the gifts I received after full recovery, so I could be a mindful, loving pet mom.
Oh, I love that. That's so beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing. I really appreciate you sharing your truth.
Sure.
And I would love to get into kind of even this idea or concept of full recovery. Maybe though, before we talk about it, maybe you do need to just help the listeners to understand what anorexia is and what are some common signs and symptoms, because I do believe, and this is maybe that's something that'll come up as you kind of talk, I feel like there are a lot of misconceptions around anorexia. And so there might, it might not be clear like what it actually is. So I would love for you to kind of go into that first.
Absolutely. So anorexia is a serious but treatable mental and physical illness. There are some characteristics, and number one is usually a restriction of energy intake that sometimes leads to weight loss, okay? But I want to be really clear that it doesn't have to, that people of all shapes and sizes can have anorexia, okay? So it's a restriction of energy intake. That's number one. Also, for most, it's an intense fear of becoming fat and or gaining weight. Okay. Then there's persistent behaviors that get in the way of restoration of weight. And then lastly, which is probably the most psychologically difficult, is the perception of one's body weight or size. And so there is typically an obsession with body weight or size, and they see their bodies not in the way that other people are able to see. So that's, and as well, it's in one of the eating disorders, and it is a serious illness it is no one's fault. No one causes an eating disorder. However, when we have anorexia, it's the responsibility for us to hopefully get a support team to help us feel better and get better.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for explaining that. And I really wanted you, I'm glad you touched on the point that, you know, although like body size is not, you know, weight loss is not always a symptom of anorexia. And unfortunately, I feel like when it becomes way too late for someone who, if their body is responding with weight loss, then it's almost taken more seriously. But I feel like there's people, everything you just described, I know for a fact that 90% of the people listening are like, that kind of sounds like me, you know? So and I think it's important because, you know, we here at Tips with Tony really touch on more like disordered eating to kind of prevent it from going to those extremes. And I think bringing the awareness to all the different ways that it can take shape in a person is really important. So thank you for shedding light on that and sharing that.
Sure. And I want to say, in terms of what you brought up, the majority of people who reach out to me think I'm not sick enough. And I think that is a topic that's really important to talk about because, again, people have this image that someone with an eating disorder has an emaciated body size. And I'm here to say that people of all body shapes and sizes can be diagnosed and have an eating disorder. You are sick enough and you deserve help.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
So one of the other, I mean, I guess before I ask this, are there any other misconceptions? I feel like the big one is that someone needs to be like, their BMI needs to be under like 18.5. I mean, like if I go back to my clinical days, right? That's when it's like,
of
right.
course.
That's what we were always taught. Like, it's kind of like they have to be severely underweight in order to be taken seriously, which is so sad. But any other misconceptions that we might be missing that might be worth talking about?
You know, I think that one of the misconceptions is that eating disorders is a lifestyle choice. You know, I remember a personal experience being in a workplace many years ago, and someone asked me about my tattoo, which talks about my journey. And I said, I fully recovered from anorexia. I wish I had that. And I said, wow. I said, you know, and I turned to them and I said, no, you don't. It was the biggest nightmare I went through. And let me give you some education about what eating disorders are. So I think in our society, and I know your mouth's wide open.
I literally, no, like you guys can't see, you know, some of you will watch this video on YouTube, but most people just listen to the audio.
Yeah.
Like I actually was just speechless. Like I've heard ridiculous things that it's really sad that we live in. I've heard ridiculous things like, I wish I could get the stomach virus or I get like sick. So I just like not feel the need or want to eat. Cause I always feel like the need or want to eat. Like that's bad enough. But the fact that you would wish you had anorexia, that's absolutely terrible. That's so sad.
It is really sad. So I find it, you know, definitely my calling to do my small part of like educating people about really what they are. And I think people think it's about vanity and it's this lifestyle choice, but it's not. These are complex mental and physical illnesses. Eating disorders have the second highest mortality rate of any mental illness, second to opioid overdose. The second. And so every 52 minutes, someone dies of an eating disorder. And so I think we don't hear about it. We don't realize how serious it is. So eating disorders are not a lifestyle choice. It is serious. It's caused by a lot of different factors that we often in the field call a perfect storm. And so it's really important for people to recognize that. As I said earlier, you can't tell that someone has an eating disorder by looking at that. Like, that's what people think. Like, oh, that person, they're fine. Oh, they must have this or that. Absolutely not. You need to hear their story. You need to know what they're engaging in to know what type of eating disorder or if they're having disordered eating. And that's awesome that you guys have this podcast to help those people before it becomes a full-blown eating disorder.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. So I would love for you, if you're okay with kind of sharing a little bit more about your journey, kind of when the eating disorder started for you and kind of take it from like the beginning to like the messy middle and then to be able to be fully recovered. I feel like that's the other misconception. It's that once you have an eating disorder, you can never really fully recover.
Yes.
That you're always kind of and I guess maybe you can speak to that. Like, I'm sure you still always need to be, implementing things and working it, but it's not active. So I'm curious. Yeah, I would love for you to kind of speak on the journey if we're getting to end.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I was sort of diagnosed with an eating disorder at age 13. I'm 48 now. And so back then they didn't really have a lot of information. My parents were under the, thought that, oh, we'll just eat. And I think that's another misconception we talk about is that, eating disorders are not serious. They'll go away on your own. People will outgrow it. People will just eat. And that is not true. So going back at age 13, I remember being a child who had a lot of perfectionism characteristics. I was very a big achiever, very dedicated, got straight A's, wanted to be, the top athlete in any sport. And I realized that I was definitely someone who just kept on doing. And I got a lot of recognition from that, from family and friends. I also realized from a young age that I had these emotions that were like bubbling through my body. However, I didn't really feel safe to share them. I didn't really understand what they were. I didn't know what I was feeling. And I know in our family, we often wanted to focus on the positive emotions and we sort of kind of pushed away the negative emotions. So for me, I just pushed them down so deep that I didn't really feel them. And I spent a lot of my life very numb and disconnected and disassociated. So what happened at age 13 is that I started to become extremely, well, even at age 10, I usually say I became aware that I had a body. I always had a body, but I had no emotional connection to it. It was just the, life suit I wore through life. Yeah. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh, why is my body different from that body? Or, why is my body changing? And for me, it became an extremely critical narrative that started at a very young age, that I thought it was never good enough. I was never thin enough. And it was this narrative that just drove me to some of the behaviors with anorexia, including restriction. So skipping meals, skipping snacks. I had extreme overexercise behavior. I also then ventured into, I had anorexia binge purge type. So I had periods of restriction. And then when I ate, at times I would binge and purge. And it was a cycle that really plagued me for over 25 years. When I was diagnosed as a young girl, my parents brought me to a therapist. And I went once, didn't like her, because I thought she was trying to take it away from me. And I told my parents, I'm good, I'll eat. Okay, great, awesome. Okay, back to our happy family. And then what I did is I hid it. I hid it for years and years. I was at a suitable weight range, and so no one knew that I was suffering. And I hid it all through high school and college and in my 20s and into my 30s. And instead of getting better, it got worse and worse. In my 20s, I did take some responsibility. I went to see a therapist and a psychiatrist. I was on medication and I started to do some work. However, at that point, I did not want to give up my eating disorder. It was so comforting to me and protective to me. I didn't know how to handle life without it. Right. And so even when I woke up and said, I'm going to get better, right? Then the next day I'm not eating. And I'm like, wait a second, I have this, I really want to, but it's so hard to implement. Right. And it was really difficult for me to get to a place where I was able to manage my emotions and deal with life without engaging in an eating disorder. I know that I went through periods of time where I went to therapy. I stopped going to therapy, but it was consistent in my life, really with no breaks. It was basically, as some people call it, my best friend, but really what it was, I isolated so much that it got to the point where I was staying at home with the shades down, never leaving the house. too afraid of being judged by other people and even just judging myself. And it got really, really bad. So at age 35, I knew that things were not getting better. My parents sort of noticed, due to extreme weight loss, that something was wrong, even though something was wrong many, many years before.
Right.
And I decided, kicking and screaming, to go into a partial hospitalization program specializing in eating disorders. I went into the Columbia Day Treatment Program in New York City, and I stayed there for 6 months, where I went to different therapy groups, and more importantly, I went to meal support groups. So I ate lunch every day at the program and dinner a few times a week. And I have to say, the meal support groups and therapy groups saved my life. Yeah. So, yeah.
That's a powerful statement.
It is. I know eating disorders are not about the food, and it is about the food. However, for me, the constant exposure therapy, because I could shout my emotions from the rooftop, I could talk about my trauma in my childhood, all of these things. But if I didn't sit down and eat the food, I was never going to get better. And my safe lists, I often say in my book that it got so small, it could fit on this Post-it note, in terms of what was safe. And so, I could go to dinner or lunch or breakfast, but I would always get the same exact things.
Right.
And so the variety and the exposure was really, really helpful. And then after I left the program, I truly believe that was when recovery started. I break it down into treatment was going to the program. Recovery started when I left and got back into the world without the PHP bubble, and trying to identify, okay, now how am I able to move forward and use the skills necessary and to continue to, move forward. It took many, many, many years, a lot of relapses, and it so happened that I had another relapse in my early 40s. And I just knew that this time it was not going to break me. That there was something shifted. It was like a spiritual experience where I remember my nephew, hugging me and saying something about my weight. And it was just like, wait a second, this is not my purpose. I need to work harder. I need to get the supports that I need. And I threw myself into recovery. I did more therapy. I was on medication. I did meal support and all of the above, and was able to eventually reach where I feel is full recovery, where I'm a person without an eating disorder. So I respect my disease. However, it's not active in my life in any way, shape, or form. It's not how I manage life or my emotions.
Wow. I mean, it sounds like night and day from where you were kind of in the depths of the ED versus where you are now. It's like you probably look back and you're like, wow, that was me,
Yeah. I often say, I pinch myself, I can't believe this is my life, because I truly believe my life with an eating disorder was in black and white and gray. And then my life fully recovered is colorful. I mean, I'm not saying it's all rainbows and unicorns, but it is so amazing compared to where I was.
Almost like just experiencing life again.
I feel like a newborn baby.
Literally, because it started really young for you. It's almost like you're getting your childhood back.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Because even in my childhood, I was so self-conscious. And so now I'm like, wait, I'm not self-conscious anymore. I'm me and I'm amazing. And I finally can say that and believe it. And, and I'm not comparing myself to anybody else. And I'm able to recognize that there are healthier ways to deal with emotions. And it's okay to feel depressed and anxious and worried and all of these feelings. And so to give myself actually the acceptance and validation of my feelings. And that's been really helpful in my therapeutic life, getting my degree in social work and having a private practice, being able to help other people through the journey as well.
Yeah. I do feel like, I do think that as practitioners, this might, I don't know how it's going to sound, but I do believe it's easier for us to recover because we're constantly teaching and educating about it. So I guess there's a giant truck coming by, of course, when I'm trying to talk. I don't know if you guys can hear that. I guess because you did, and thank you for your honesty too about kind of sharing the relapses. I don't think people realize like how often, we relapse, but it's, it's always, there's an opportunity for growth. Right. Absolutely. And one of the quotes that always come to mind is like, when, a setback is actually a setup. Like a setback is just setting you up for it. Just maybe you weren't ready yet. Maybe you didn't learn the lesson you needed to, it's kind of exposing you to maybe a new way, a different way, or just trying it again. But I guess for those who are listening, who maybe feel like they could go either way, right? It's like they're trying to heal, they're trying to recover, but like one trigger, one thing that someone says, one thing they see on social media, it can send them right back. So how do you help your clients deal with triggers? And if you want to share any examples of a specific trigger, that's fine. But just in general, like what can somebody do when they are feeling triggered and they, might back step a few steps?
So one of the things that I teach, and I didn't come up with this, Carolyn Costin did in her 8 Keys of Recovery, is that I'm a big believer in having my clients reach out to me or someone from their support system when they have a triggering situation. So it's not about dealing with it yourself. We will eventually be able to do that. But in treatment, it's really important to reach out to me or a coach or someone from our group or something like that to say, hey, I'm struggling. I'm having, this is really triggering to me. And I think because then they use their voice, they're able to express how they feel. Hopefully they get validation from whoever they're reaching out to. And then we're able to kind of problem solve together in terms of, okay, what coping strategies can we use right now to help you through this trigger? One thing that we often talk about in the groups I run is comments from well-meaning people that can be extremely triggering. And so we actually do role plays in my group that they will come up with things that have happened in the past or things that they think might happen around the holidays or at a summer vacation or something like that. And we role play in terms of what maybe we can say to ourselves, right? And then some things maybe we can use our voice and say out loud. And when we have a trigger, we also identify that the eating disorder self might get highlighted. And so we want to be able to then dig deep and get our healthy self be able to come out and respond as well. And sometimes when we can't do that, we can reach out to support to help us find our healthy self.
Yeah. So, I mean, it sounds like the best, if you're in recovery, then you are working with someone.
Yes.
It sounds like it's not possible to do it alone. And I think that's where so many people, like going back to what you said earlier, they think like they're not sick enough. So they think they can do it on their own. And we can't do anything alone. Nothing we've ever done is ever alone. Even if it's like you're reading a book, you didn't get the idea out of thin air. You read the book and it helped you to push through. But having someone physically that you can reach out to, it is so needed and so necessary.
So needed. Yeah. And I'm happy that I am a Carolyn Costin certified eating disorder coach, because really she just started this program a few years ago, because it's really like the idea of a sponsor in AA.
Yes.
And so someone, I have a client who's I'm her coach, and we talk every day.
Yeah.
And it's something because, again, you can go to therapy, which is amazing. I'm a therapist, week to week for an hour a week or something like that. But when you wake up and you have that thought to engage in a behavior, or someone just said something, or you're having a hard time at work, just to be able to reach out to get that support is key in recovery.
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. So I feel like I have so many questions.
Sure.
I want you to definitely talk about your book, but I guess before we do that, I think we have a lot more work to be done, but there's a big push for like body neutrality, body positivity. Mm-hmm. I mean, depending on what you follow, but then there's also like, you see like so much fat shaming going on, like, and so much like just nasty people in the comments of, on TikTok's really big right now. And I guess, like, have you noticed like the eating disorders have gotten worse, stayed the same, or gotten like there's been more healing because of the positive exposure, or is it getting worse because of the negative exposure? Like, have you noticed that playing a role in someone's recovery?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think in general, in terms of the rate of eating disorders, it has skyrocketed since COVID. So, I mean, unfortunately, the numbers are really, really high. We have waiting lists. People at least are reaching out for help, but we just don't have enough practitioners. So I really believe that we need to go back to like the preventative measures and what we can do in school systems and things like that, because there's just not enough practitioners to help everybody who's suffering.
Right.
With that said, I think that I've helped my clients as well as me is to be able to follow people who have more body acceptance, body positivity, and to be able to follow those social media and to delete all the ones that are toxic and are triggering. And sometimes I have clients come to me and we delete different accounts, we add different together. Yeah, we add. I have lists on my website, and we all, like a group, we all talk about like, hey, follow that person, because I think that with certain people, like Lizzo, Renee Sonia Taylor, like there's so many amazing people out there that are able to help us remember that it's important to celebrate body diversity. I mean, I truly believe that one of the factors of me getting an eating disorder was living in a diet culture, which we usually do, right? Yeah. This is where we live. Yeah. But I had this thought that there was this beauty ideal I had to attain it. If I didn't attain it, I was a failure. And then as I'm learning through therapy and through amazing people in the world, that I'm like, wait a second, like we're all like snowflakes or flowers or dogs. I like to use dogs. Like we don't compare dogs to each other. It's like ridiculous when we think about it. I don't want to like minimize it because it's so critical. Yeah. It's to be able to say like, I have a body and it's going to be different from you because I'm different from you. And I'm going to celebrate that. Yeah. And I think we have a tremendous work to do, but I feel very positive about it. I think maybe because I follow a lot of like, it depends who I always think so too. I feel like we're making moves, we're making shifts. And then every once in a while I see like the other side of TikTok and I'm like, oh God. I know. And that's usually what I try not to look at. But I guess we have to
wow. So we have a long way to go then.
Yeah. Well, exactly. Because think about it, how tethered and embedded these messages are in our soul. And it's really about unlearning them and recognizing that we have to look at the facts and unlearning them and not just blindly going along with this social construct that was made up. Yeah. Someone made it up.
Made
and then they're like, wait a second, we can make a lot of money out of this social construct. We could, and then boom, that's what happened. And then all people were like, oh, I need to do that to change or that to change.
There's always a new trend. There's always a new trend. There's always something we're going to feel like we need to change. Now eyebrows are in. Years ago, eyebrows were supposed to be thin. Now they're supposed to be thick and full. Now people are getting eyelash extensions and Botox and bigger lips and bigger butts. Oh my God. There's like actually like, I didn't even know this is a thing, but I've been reminded of like, I went to like 2 events. People are literally getting butt injections.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Sure.
Like butt implants. Like they're going, but and it's so funny because when I growing up, boobs were in and people were getting boob implants. And it's like you're going for an elective surgery. You're choosing to go under anesthesia, cut open your body. That's a trauma. You're literally choosing to put your body in a traumatic state. Why?
That's a really good question. Yeah.
And people are more willing to do something like and it's not to knock anybody who has maybe had it. And I know there's other reasons, but like something like a bariatric surgery where you're like losing parts of your intestines, your ability to absorb nutrients from a health perspective, you're putting yourself, you potentially could say, it depends how it affects your body, but you are putting yourself at a risk of being malnourished, all at the expense just to fit into a smaller pant size.
I know. You know, an author and a therapist says, bigger genes, bigger life. And really, it's about recognizing that when we are trying to change or fit into this mold, our life gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And when we're able to slowly, I know it's hard, to practice acceptance, you know, our life just slowly gets bigger in more ways than one. But like in a way, like to say, like, this is me, and I'm not going to apologize for having a body. And that's why I love Sonia Taylor, like in her book. My body's not an apology. I don't need to justify it to anybody.
I love that book.
You know, I think that we really want to help the younger generation and younger people be able to recognize, you know, that we are all different and we're all beautiful, and diversity should be celebrated, you know, and not the other way.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Okay, let's talk about your book now.
Yeah.
Congratulations, first of all. As an author, I understand how hard it is to write a book. And from an emotional perspective, I'm sure you had to revisit a lot of unpleasant places. It takes long. I don't know how long it took you, but it took me a lot longer than I thought. Not even from, like, you know, the fact of writing a book and making it sound good and tell a story, but more from the emotional end. It was like almost done for me. My book was almost done for almost like a whole year. And I just was so hesitant to complete it because I was afraid of like what my family was going to say. I had to, like, you know, bring up some things and so all that to say, I know how hard it is to write a book. So kudos to you. I would love for you to share a little bit about maybe what someone can expect from reading it.
Yeah, sure. So my book, it is broken down into 5 parts: history, treatment, recovery, relapse, and full recovery. And it is about really my honest recovery. I am really honest in my story. And again, yes, it was hard to put out there, but I'm letting go of any judgments because this is my story. I have a voice and I'm going to share it. But I talked a little bit about my history as a young child, going through, you know, suffering from the eating disorder, going into formal treatment, recovery that took, you know, years and years and years, the relapse, and then full recovery that really I have been in the last few years. Why I wrote this book, first of all, it was very cathartic for me, but why I wrote this book is to share with people what eating disorder is really like, my journey, but so people don't believe the myths that this is like what it is, and also to give hope and inspire people that recovery is possible. When I had an eating disorder, I truly thought this was my life. I was going to be a woman with an eating disorder for the rest of my life. And then I met some people who were like, no, you can be fully recovered. And then like I used my determined, you know, my strength to be like, really? Challenge accepted, you know, you know? And so I was like, oh, wait, there's something else. And for me, and, you know, so it's here to help people. It's for anyone who's suffering from an eating disorder. It's for caretakers. It's for family members. It's for therapists. And, it took me years, you know, to write the book. I had an initial book and changed it. And I thought me writing a personal story is where I have more passion and I love to write. So kind of worked out together.
Amazing. Yeah. So where can people find it?
Yeah, you can find my book in Opening the Door on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, anywhere books are sold. Which is really wonderful. Yeah, I'm really proud of it. I'm doing book talks and book signings and all that good stuff and just trying to put it out there, you know, and being part of the eating disorder community.
I love it. Oh my God, this sounds so great. Any last minute things you want to share or talk about before we wrap up and let people know where they can find you?
A lot of people ask me what full recovery is, and that's going to be different for everybody. But in terms of my description, I'll read it, is I accept and attune to my here and now body and treat it with care, compassion, and respect. I experience freedom and joy by connecting to others, feeling my feelings, eating regularly, and living in the present moment. I find purpose, meaning, and self-worth unrelated to my body, weight, or shape. Also, I add, I become a pet parent to Maverick, who likes to cuddle in my lap, attacks me with kisses when I walk in the door, and does not shed.
Oh, I love that. But that is so true, though. That is so true. It's that was great.
Yeah, so that's just my definition, and it's something that I'm so, even in the fourth one about having a pet, I was so sick I couldn't take care of a pet. And so me every day getting up and feeding her and walking her and loving her is all testament to my full recovery that I'm able to give to other people and have relationships and things that I didn't have when I had an eating disorder.
Yeah. I love it. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for sharing your story.
It's really nice to meet you, and I'm so happy to be on.
Yeah, so nice to meet you as well. Can you please share where people can find you, connect with you, reach out if they have any questions?
Absolutely. So you can reach me on Instagram at ed_recovery_mo. So that is my Instagram. I do tips every Tuesday, so hopefully you guys can find that. And you can also reach me on Facebook and LinkedIn and all those good places with social media.
Amazing. Thank you so much, guys. Make sure you give her a follow. Honestly, I stumbled across her Instagram and everything she was saying, I was like, people need to hear this. People need to hear this. This is really good. This is really helpful. And I just reached out to her. And so normally when people are guests, it's people who've reached out to me or I've been following them for a while, or it's like a friend of a friend. Like this was something that literally just seemed very aligned. And I was like, she would be a great guest. And I love this episode. Thank you so much. It was so great having you. Yeah. So guys, make sure you give her a follow. And if you're not subscribed to the Tips with Tony podcast, make sure you hit the subscribe button. A new episode comes out every Tuesday and Thursday. And when you're subscribed, you don't miss a beat. All right. That's it from us today. Thank you so much for listening.
Thanks, Johnny.
You're welcome.
Happy Friday.
All right. Talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.